This program is presented to you in color.
We just got the Avengers Doomsday trailer a couple weeks ago, and I've seen so many people with the theory that the Steve Rogers we see at the end of the trailer is actually an evil variant. But is that really what's going on? Hey everyone, Braden here. Welcome to the Doomsday Clock series, where we build theories around the next Avengers film right up to its release. So the question is whether or not we believe that the Steve Rogers in this movie is working for Doctor Doom. Is he the ultimate Hydra sleeper agent? And if this isn't our Steve, then where the heck is he? I think the answer is complicated. I've actually been trying to crack this video for a couple weeks now, and I know some of you will think the idea of this is kind of crazy. So my goal is to provide you with 3 different scenarios for how this could work, and why I think it could be an insane revelation. So first, we'll recap Victor Von Doom's philosophy and why he would want to recruit evil variants of heroes in the first place. And then we'll stress test 3 distinct scenarios that pin Steve Rogers as evil, and explain why Steve is actually a very strategic character for Doom to have on his side. So let's get into it. Now, to understand why Steve Rogers is the primary target in this multiversal war, you have to realize that Doctor Doom doesn't see Captain America as a hero. He sees him as the ultimate cosmic criminal. We're going to dive into a bit of rumors in this section as we kind of talk about the philosophy of Doctor Doom, why he would want Steve on his side, and also why he kind of hates Steve Rogers, because there is evidence for it. This all kind of starts with the idea that Steve Rogers, at the end of Endgame, hopped on a time platform with the Infinity Stones and Mjolnir and returned them, and then went back to live with Peggy. And supposedly, according to rumors, Loki takes Steve to Earth 838, or Earth 828, mix them up, which is where the Fantastic Four are. And so Steve lives there with his family to be recruited by the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom later on. So that's kind of the basis that we're going to start with. Point is that Steve traveling back in time supposedly caused Doctor Doom's family to be killed. We don't know how this happened. We don't know why this happened, but it could have triggered an incursion, which is the likely scenario, and why Doctor Doom is so obsessed with, wanting to rewrite the multiverse. And we also know that in the trailer they showed at SDCC, Doom says, "All of you have lived stolen lives, and now you must give them back." That is a crazy line to deliver in a trailer months before the movie's release. This kind of builds on the theory I have that RDJ and his Doctor Doom were from the Sacred Timeline, and He Who Remains wrote them out and placed Tony Stark in place of him to live out his life as a hero and isolate Doctor Doom and his magic and science and that deadly combo. Instead, you have Tony Stark, the hero who sacrifices himself at the end of Endgame and becomes the ultimate hero versus the ultimate villain, the ultimate threat to He Who Remains. So what I'm trying to say is, if these heroes have lived stolen lives, and I'm going to do a whole video on this, so don't worry, I'm just kind of glancing at it to make a point. If these heroes are indeed maybe not all who they actually are, and He Who Remains actually rewrote more than just Victor Von Doom, that's living stolen lives. There's also another layer to this where Steve Rogers, is living a stolen life by living with Peggy and his son, taking a life that wasn't meant to be his and making it his by rewriting time and reality. So all that is to say that Victor Von Doom has a grudge, he has a mission, he is determined, and he's out for blood. So going into the movie, it's safe to assume that he is going to have allies. We know that there's these hooded figures that he's got on his side, whether or not they're characters like Wanda, Doctor Strange, Clea, we don't know yet, but there are characters that could be on Doom's side. Like maybe we get a Maestro Hulk, maybe we get a King Thanos, maybe we get an evil Spider-Man variant. I mean, all these things could happen in Doomsday, and it's very exciting to think about that and to not know for sure. I feel like Marvel's kind of kept some of this movie quite well under wraps, which is great, and I hope it stays that way up to December. But all this is to say that the Avengers and their sins, Doctor Doom's not fans of them. To him, they're temporal criminals, and they broke the natural order of the cosmos by rewriting history, by cheating death, and jumping into alternate timelines to steal their own happy endings. So yeah, Steve Rogers embodies that stolen life more than anybody. He abandoned his primary life on 616 to steal a life with Peggy in a branched reality. Doom's entire campaign is built on cosmic justice. To break the Avengers, Doom has to target their ultimate moral anchor and prove that Steve's choices directly caused the collapse of reality. He is staging a public execution of the Avengers' morality, proving to the entire multiverse that their greatest leader's happy ending is the exact reason reality is collapsing. Our first scenario on this list relies on a terrifying psychological reality that our Steve Rogers is willing to choose to enforce Dr. Doom's totalitarian rule. This theory is that the Steve Rogers in the trailer is the exact one from Endgame. He's the one we've been following, and over the duration of the film, he eventually willingly sides with Doom because Doom breaks his moral compass. It gets shattered by the truth. And Doom could use his cosmic knowledge to show Steve this objective data that Steve is the reason why this stuff fell apart. He's the reason why billions of lives are lost. And there's a chance that Doom could be kind of altering the truth, not telling Steve what really happened. You know, there's a reality where what Doom is kind of getting at here is a little skewed. It's a way to manipulate the heroes into siding with him, believing in his cause, going to the X-Men universe, and fighting the X-Men. You know, that takes some manipulation on Doom's part, I think. You know, we'll see that play out. So there's a chance that Steve is just so guilt-ridden and so just beat down by this reality that he did this, that he feels an obligation to side with Doom, to step away from the heroes and say, guys, you know, I myself caused this pain. I created him. I am the reason why this is all happening. You know, I think there's a reality where that happens. But I think if Doom did lie to the heroes, it's possible that the truth that he's keeping from them is that his family was killed by him, sacrificed by him in order to gain power, in order to understand incursions better. You know, we don't know exactly what it was, but there is a reality where, you know, what he's saying is not true. And this could actually be a reason why heroes and characters who are on his side eventually break from his side, that they see that he's not fully truthful, and that's a good way to kind of have characters agree at first and then break away in Secret Wars or whatever. Putting this on the stress test, the upside of this theory is it still honors Steve's character. I don't think Steve would ever break for selfish reasons, but crushing guilt over inadvertently killing billions of lives would completely hollow him out. And there was a quote by Chris Evans recently where he said the Russos just love beating up Steve Rogers in the movies, and this would be a way to do that. Just putting that immense guilt on him would, I think, really do that. Now, the downside of this is I think jaded fans will argue that Steve Rogers always finds a third option. So siding with a tyrant, even out of guilt, pushes his character dangerously close to being irredeemable. And I think there is truth to that as well. Now, if you guys don't ever think Steve Rogers would break under pressure, this second scenario takes a popular Marvel comic, and it kind of proves that the man in the trailer might be a flawless imposter playing the ultimate long game with Victor Von Doom. Steve was taken to the Fantastic Four universe by Loki. He's been there for supposedly like 10 years. And then Doom comes to visit the Fantastic Four. They kind of discover that Steve Rogers is an anomaly, so they go to visit him and recruit him to Earth 616 to kind of rally up the troops and get them to the X-Men universe. The reason that's important is because there is a chance that before Reed and Doom go to recruit Steve, that Doom or his masked individuals could have gone to Steve's house, imprisoned him or whatever, and replaced him with a ruthlessly disciplined, Hydra-trained variant from a world that Doom already visited. And this would be a way to keep Steve, the one that we know and love, alive somewhere else. But in the meantime, we have this sleeper agent who's manipulating the heroes, making sure we're all kind of going towards Doom's plan in a way that Steve Rogers wouldn't. So that's a possibility. There is comic precedent for him lifting Mjolnir as Hydra Cap. You know, in the comics, there's reality manipulation, and it kind of altered what the hammer considered worthy. It was more about who's strongest rather than who's most worthy. In that scenario, Steve in the trailer could be a sleeper agent, which is obviously what Hydra is known for, and could be playing the long game to gain Thor's trust and dismantle the Avengers from the inside. So putting this to the stress test, it perfectly explains why there's a scruffy, smug, non-costumed Steve Rogers in the trailer. He's a spy, and he's wearing the skin of the hero that we know and love. The downside is some sectors of the audience, which we've already seen the last couple weeks, they might find this whole idea kind of stupid, a cheap trope, and it deflates the emotional stakes of the movie. I totally get that. And there's a reality where if this was executed this way, it could be done really stupidly, and that's a possibility. But this does make the Hydra variant theory kind of a case of psychological espionage. And by the time the Avengers realize they're following a wolf in sheep's clothing, it could be too late. Maybe Steve Rogers kills Bucky, and this like devastating moment at the end of the movie. You know, so many things could happen that could kind of reveal that he's Hydra Cap at the end, and that would be kind of cool, not gonna lie. And I think it would also be a really great way to bring prominence to these kind of less popular, less liked characters like Sam Wilson's Captain America, giving him this scene or this material where he has to really rise up against this evil Steve variant and step up to the challenge of leadership. He's not stepping on the shoes of Steve Rogers, so when he does make a triumphant return in Secret Wars, it could make the story just have a bit more weight. But I think the most terrifying possibility, which is their third option, it's that Doctor Doom uses the birth of Battleworld to violently rewrite Steve's history against his will. And this is kind of probably the most popular, kind of easily digestible theory of this. We've got a multiversal incursion that's happening, heroes from all different Earths coming together on Latveria, villains, and we got this big battle. Doom eventually wins, creates Battleworld, and rewrites all these heroes into, well, not all of them, but most of them into people who serve him. In this new patchwork world, Doom is God. He doesn't just control the land, he controls the memories, the histories of everyone he allows to survive. And he looks at Steve Rogers and he realizes that he can't let that spark of rebellion exist on Battleworld. So instead of just brainwashing Steve, Doom literally edits his timeline. He rewrites him, just like He Who Remains did to Victor Von Doom and Tony Stark. That's something there. When Steve wakes up on Battleworld, he's Hydra Cap. His history's been fundamentally altered. There's a lot of ups to this theory. It completely protects the character integrity of Earth 616 Steve Rogers. His core traits, they're all still there. But they've just been tragically reprogrammed to serve the wrong side. And, you know, I don't think there's really a downside to this one, guys. I mean, I think this is probably the most likely scenario if I had to put my bets on something. Executing this twist at the exact moment the multiverse dies, Doom instantly robs the survivors of their greatest symbol of hope. Starting a new world with Hydra Captain America firmly under his thumb is kind of a flex. So whether it's guilt, an imposter, or literally altering reality, any of these three scenarios shifts the MCU from a standard superhero brawl, and into kind of a psychological horror film. If any of these three scenarios play out, the psychological horror doesn't just land on Sam Wilson, it lands on the entire MCU. I mean, the sheer hopelessness and the terror that the Avengers will feel when they realize that the one man who has always guided them out of the darkness is now the one enforcing Doom's totalitarian rule. So this turns the potential events of Secret Wars into something far more desperate than a fight for a magic gauntlet. It could make the fate of the entire multiverse depend on whether the Avengers can save the soul of the one man who always saved theirs. But let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments below. Which scenario, if any, do you think is most likely? And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, join our Discord, and if you dug this video, be sure to check out our other Doomsday Clock videos. They're great, they're building towards something in December, and it's just kind of a journey that we're all on together. I've been Brandon Vowels, and I'll see you in the next one.